Alright, welcome to the part 2 of 3 parts for each of the elements. And so now we have come and arrived to the element known as the indirect resource. The indirect resource has the same polarity, and therefore, like the other resource star, it is also one that benefits the self. But as we look into the 10 elements here, or in the old text, they call it the gods, but these are not the deities that people worship. They're just meant to be some kind of elements that actually represents or denote the nature or the features of a person. And so usually for each of them we have what we call the direct stars. The direct stars are considered the favorable stars. For example, when it comes to wealth, which is the favorable element for wealth? And that would be direct wealth. When it comes to officer, the one that is favorable will be the direct officer. And for resource, naturally would be the direct resource. And the output would be in God, and for self, that would be the friend star. And so these are the 5 direct stars. And these direct stars are deemed to be harmonious and deemed to be auspicious, deemed to be favorable. But again, some of these readings were based on the ancient texts, based on the value systems of the past. The indirect stars are deemed to be less auspicious, deemed to be unfavorable at times, such as indirect wealth, such as hurting officer, such as 7K, such as rob wealth. And naturally, today's topic will be indirect resource. And resource is resource. Resource overall would be one that benefits the self. It produces the self. So direct and indirect. An indirect resource is deemed to be one that produces, one that benefits the self, but comes with ulterior motive, comes with a price, comes with not selfless but selfish. So meaning to say that direct resource is the mother, and the indirect resource is the stepmother. The indirect resource is a helper or an assistant that provides support, not because they want to, but they have to or they do, mercilessly, as they call it. And therefore these are known as the indirect stars. And so usually we would like to find a balance between direct and indirect stars, as we want to then deem how and whether this would be auspicious or not. Now as we look into each of these resource, all these resource stars, they have very different effects as we look into them. So now let's just explore the effects of each of these indirect resource. Now usually as we look into the resource, which resource tends to be sacrificial? As I say sacrificial, one points immediately to the ting fire. What would be the indirect resource of the ting fire? The yeet wood. As the yeet wood produces to the ting fire, it burns. As it burns, the yeet wood is also one that denotes network. And therefore, a ting fire day master having a yin wood or yeet wood will be akin to a fire burning on wood. So if the wood is dry and a ting is born at night, then it will be prosperous and will be one that that provides one to become a teacher, one that becomes a leader, a teacher, a preacher, and therefore one that is very spiritual, a very spiritual leader, so to speak. But of course, terms and conditions apply. A ting fire should not see another ting fire, and a ting fire should be born at night for it to blossom to be a prosperous and a useful teacher. Otherwise, the teaching is wrong. Otherwise, the direction is misleading. So one have to be careful of that. So we look into the Ting Day Master having strong indirect resource. Now apart from that, we also find that when we look into Ren water having Keng metal. In a way, we do consider that Keng metal doesn't produce water, but it attracts. It is a production, but it is a form of attraction. Coal metal in the morning attract water, and dew forms around it. Therefore, we also find that this represents wisdom. It represents drawn to academics, drawn to the world of academics, or drawn to academia. So one that is drawn to academia. As we find the Kueh water also attracted by the Sin metal. But the Sin metal is the shiny metal, the one that disposes of vanity, the one that refers to branding, the one that refers to things that shine, attracts, things that are precious. And then we'll find that the Kueh water would have resource in terms of aesthetic, in terms of beauty. And so this would be the case of how, as we look into how each of these day master change, or how their personality and characters change when they have a resource, a very strong resource that comes in. So look into more to come as it is. And so that's where we now look into the self and how the self is being produced by this resource. So generally, indirect resource is an indirect star. Therefore, the first impression is that it is not favorable. And one of the key reasons why it is not favorable is because it represents loneliness and quiet. It represents unconventional thinking. It represents awkwardness. In a way, I'm not making any direct link here, but if you look into people who have a bit of autism, and we find that people who are autistic or who are in the spectrum of being autistic or ADHD, they too manifest the kind of awkwardness, the kind of intelligence. I mean, autistic people are very intelligent. I mean, Albert Einstein was one of them, and they too are awkward. They too are not socially likable at the beginning. But we also find that the indirect resource represents knowledge or drawn towards things that are religious, things that are metaphysical, things that are superstitious. In a way, that is why last week I asked the question that all of you, one way or the other, would have, maybe with the exception of Kim Tae, to have indirect resource one way or the other. And so now let's take a look into a continuation of where indirect resource comes in, a bit of a refresher where we look into day masters that are sitting on resource. And therefore day masters that sits on resource have a very natural inclination to things that are metaphysic, religious, things that are related to spirituality and so on. So we also find day masters that sits on indirect resource. Sits on indirect resource. And therefore, these are masters of the mind. So now as we continue, let's also see where we often do. Where do we find indirect resource in a particular chart? So here we look into Emily Rosa, a pink day master, a pink fire day master, born in February, born in the month of the tiger, born in spring. So the fire day master born in spring is strong. The day master that is born has rooting in the pink fire here, and also rooted, which is here, supported by resource. So we do find that it has resource supporting it, it has rooting, and it is born in not the exact season, but it is born. A fire day master born in spring represents a strong day master. Therefore, we do have, so this day master is very strong. We also see that resource represents, the resource is represented as wood element in this chart, and wood is definitely peak. Therefore, we have very strong resource and a very strong day master. Therefore, you do find that the resource would be domineering. So therefore, this person would be smart. This person is very smart. And we do see that, of course, as we often do, that we refer to the month branch. And so the month pillar, the month branch here would be the wood, and therefore that's indirect resource. So this would represent the structure. And so structure would be the core element or characteristics of this day master. And resource, of course, would be a person that is drawn towards knowledge, to be a knowledge provider in some sort. And so here we find that this lady, she somehow won a Guinness World Book Record to be the youngest person at the age of 9 to carry out a scientific study, especially on debunking therapeutic touch. So way back into the 90s, there was an emerging pseudo-scientific approach known as therapeutic touch. And so this girl at the age of 9 carried out or introduced double-blind test. Very simple as it may be, but somehow her scientific approach has changed the way that social scientists today, or even scientists or medical scientists, carry out their research. And so that would be the part where she has gained fame, or she has won an award for that. Therefore, areas in terms of therapeutic touch, majoring in psychology. Now, things like therapeutic touch, wrongfully or rightfully, is related to indirect resource. So when we talk about indirect resource, we talk about religion, we talk about superstition, we talk about metaphysics, and all those in the area. And in this wide spectrum of metaphysics, of spiritual, paranormal, there are, of course, both scientific and non-scientific matters. There are also areas pertaining to fraud, pertaining to mind tricks and so on, magic shows. Therefore, that's also indirect resource that one has to clear. Alright, so this lady, being an indirect resource structure, would manifest itself strongly. So we take a look into another one. So now we have David. So David Tochi is a law enforcement officer, and he was an inspector, basically also keen in forensic science, and indirect resource is the element for investigators, forensic research out of the box, and so on. And so this here would be a Ting Fire Day Master. A Ting Fire Day Master born in summer is of course pit, and there is rooting. So you find it is rooted. So now we see once again another strong day master, born in the right season and rooted. Now for Ting Day Master, it is always crucial to determine the hour. And key into the chat if you can. Ting Fire Day Master should be born when? What would be a prosperous time zone, time zone for Ting Day Masters to be born? You would have guessed it. That's right. Born at night. So we would prefer if there is a Ting Day Master born, especially rabbit, because rabbit is wood, and wood produces the Ting Day faster. So therefore, a tiger would be even better, because tiger here would then be the direct resource for the partner. So a Ting Day Master born in the tiger hour would be great. Therefore, it will shine brightly, as it is. Alright, so anyway, here we do see that the indirect resource is protruded. Protruded and rooted. Therefore, there is rooting into the stem. So once it is protruded, once indirect resource is protruded, it is then visible. It is then visible. As it is visible, then the world would know. The world would know. And of course, the Man pillar represents the career pillar. So as it represents the career pillar, the Day Master should play the game of what you have. So you use what you have. And so this Day Master, Ting Fire Day Master, has the indirect resource on the career pillar, and so it will be favorable, it will be useful to then find a career or seek to be involved or carry out activities that manifest an indirect resource. And so here the person is an enforcement officer, inspector, who essentially one time was critical in solving that Zodiac killer serial case. And so therefore this would be how the person is carries out his name. Now when it comes to indirect resource is one element that is useful to be hidden. So therefore it's fine. Indirect resource is a hidden indirect resource is good. It is fine. So indirect resource is not necessarily an element that you would want to see it shown up. It's fine. It's fine for it just to be inside. As it is. Because indirect resource is things that are awkward, things that are peculiar, and so things that are peculiar, awkward, no need for people to see. You don't need people to look into all your indirect resource. You can keep it a secret. So therefore here, let's take a look into yet another person, and you'll find the indirect resource is here. So nothing more than just again sitting on indirect resource. Sitting on indirect resource with direct resource protruded. Yes, I'll come to that. Big pictures in a while more. Now, in the discussion on officer, we did mention that direct officer and 7K should not be seen together, one or the other. So we want to see one or the other, not to be both, because here you then have confusion. Now when we talk about resource, direct resource and indirect resource, that would be also about the same, indicating that because direct resource is conventional, direct resource is scientific, Direct resource is scientific and normative. Normative. Indirect resource is non-scientific, therefore it is non-normal, non-normal, and it's descriptive. Indirect resource is inductive, and direct resource is deductive. Now, in a way, they are opposite in many areas. Normative. Normative normally means when you make a normative statements, you are usually more academic driven. Most academicians, when they talk about theories, they always introduce the perfect world. Ceteris paribus, economics. In a perfect world where there is no transaction cost, there is no taxation, everybody is knowledgeable, then if the demand goes up, the price goes up. So that's how economists, when they introduce theories, they tend to be more normative. They tend to make statements that are positive and in a more perfect world, and then they make deductions out of it. That would be scientific. The indirect resource, they are not normative, they are not positive, they are skeptical, they are descriptive. Therefore, they describe the way it is. In a way, indirect resource is, it is what it is. It is what it is. Therefore, that will be it. And while the direct resource will be no, let us take away all the noises and let us just strip down. And so usually we would prefer that anyone who would perform research or study or whatnot should not muddle up these two, because if you muddle up these two, in a way you end up all over the place and not really come to a conclusion. So usually, unlike 7K and direct officer where we want to see only one, not two, only one. Here we can see both. It will be good. It will be good for a researcher to have the ability to be equally scientific, technical, and also non-normal, to explore things that are yet to be explored. They're unexplored. They're more explorative. Therefore, it's fine. But occasionally we do see that when these two clash together, then it may not be strong. So it would be nice to find that one is more dominant than the other. If you can try to deduct. Okay, now here, which one would then be more dominant? And of course, the one that is more dominant would be one that is protruded to the stems and rooted. Protruded to the stems and rooted. So it's protruded to the stems and rooted, then this person will have a more domineering direct resource. And it will be good to sit on an indirect resource. But it's hidden, so therefore the indirect resource is hidden. And while the direct resource is protruded. This is quite a favorable formation. It is good for direct resource to be seen. It's good for direct resource to be seen. And it's good for indirect resource to be hidden. So you have a secret weapon that nobody knows. Therefore, this would be maybe right now this may be something better. For direct resource to be seen and for indirect resource to be hidden. Why do I say that? Sometimes in our world, indirect resource people are ostracized. They are ridiculed. It is ridicule. People make fun, or people don't really understand indirect resource so much. And therefore, if the indirect resource is hidden, therefore people do not know, then there will be no ridicule, there will be no ostracization, and so on. And while your direct resource is protruded. And furthermore, direct resource is a direct star. And friend is also a direct stars. So when you have direct stars protruded to the stems, those are the auspicious, classical auspicious sign that the world can see. So therefore this gives a very good pillar, or very good formation to have. Therefore here we find that we can look into a day master such as this. Alright, so if we do find that these two are equally protruded, then that's not the best. It's not favorable. Meaning to say that if we have a scenario, where, especially when indirect resource is here and direct resource is here, therefore this would be not the best way for the public, for the people to see both your indirect resource and direct resource being protruded, especially when they are not equal. One is not dominant than the other. At least if one is dominant than the other, then maybe not so bad. I mean, if let's say there's a direct resource here and then it's rooted, therefore we find that the direct resource dominates or is stronger than the indirect resource, then at least it's something better. Something better than that. Alright. Therefore this would be how we can look into it. Now the question that is being posted, what happens when it is hidden? Now if it's hidden, of course, we'll be referring to an earth branch, isn't it? If it's an earth branch, then what happens if indirect resource is in the tomb? So if it is in the tomb of a graveyard star, naturally that would be of all places to be in, whether it's a peach blossom star or whether it's a grove star. Graveyard stars, of course, will be unfavorable, and if it is in the tomb, then this represents things that are naturally more negative. And what it can mean is that, that indirect resource can mean the stepmother, and so do we want this evil stepmother phenomena? So it's an evil stepmother feeling, maybe a tortured childhood, merciless upbringing in a way. It can also mean a lot of perversion, perverted thoughts, sexual perversion, in a way occupies the person's mind. Perversion thoughts. Therefore, these are often sexual by nature, especially for males. If there's a male perversion, can also be. Female can also be manifested the same, but more so for that. So that would be indirect resource. We can also find that I think sometimes in some area it may be some form of autism. That shows that the person's mental development is not proper, and in somehow it may also affect learning, which is cognitive, the cognitive development. So there might be some cognitive developmental problems, learning problems, dyslexia, cannot read, cannot comprehend, cannot understand, slow sometimes. Now one thing we need to see is that indirect resource are represented by the owl, as I mentioned. In a way it is somewhat annoying. Indirect resource manifests annoyance. So people are annoyed with indirect resource. Now, for those who do not understand autism, ADHD, the ordinary people get annoyed with people on the spectrum. Because people on the spectrum, they're just on their own world, they're quiet, they're in solitude, and they don't really mingle along, they don't play along, they speak their mind, and therefore it may be perceived to be annoying. So they're smart. One thing for sure is definitely they're smart, and perhaps they're just way too smart, ahead the curve, but that somehow brings annoyance to the general public. Okay, so therefore, if it is in the tomb, it manifests itself more negatively as it comes in to the body. Alright, just one more. So this was, here we find Blanche Barton, religious leader. In fact, this one was with the, which was also related to George Washington. And we do find that here we have a Ting Day Master born in autumn, where it is trapped and unrooted. Now here, now of course, I do not know. I do not know the hour, because remember, every time you deal with fire, especially Ting Day Master, the hour it provides very useful reading. So hour would be very useful, and once it's not, we wouldn't be able to tell. But one thing you can tell for sure is that there are two Ting Day Master. Now Ting Fire should not see another Ting Fire on the steps, because it's like, imagine if at night, and you are lost and you're looking for a direction, and there are two directions, there are two lighthouses, or there are two lights shining in at night, and you are lost, and it's not going to be useful when you have two directions, and therefore this normally shows misdirection. Therefore the Ting Fire Day Master may have misdirection. In a way, we also say that this sits on indirect resource, and it sits on the wood. And so a Ting Fire sitting on wood is a fire burning on a stick. Therefore, the wood provides the fire. So this Day Master would be drawn to teaching, drawn to be in a spiritual leader, a priestess, a monk, sitting on direct resource, into metaphysics, into spiritualism, into this part. And therefore here we do have one to see that there is a two Day Master, one that sits on. So once again, a Day Master that sits on the indirect resource would be one that is again more inclined to the world of spiritualism and so on. Right, now we take a look into another one. This one will be on page 16, so let me just jump there. And now let's come into, no, I'll just move along. We'll take this reading now on this person, even though it will be on that pillar sitting on another pillar. Okay, again, let's just handle Damien Eccles. Look at this. Where do you find indirect resource? So the indirect resource, where can you find it here? This is a pink Day Master, fire, fire. Alright, now people who have two fires, whether Ting or Pink, if you can, please don't follow them as a spiritual leader. These are not sometimes not out of intentions, but they themselves may find themselves not the best to actually lead people. Okay, here we will find that this is a Pink Fire Day Master, born at the peak of winter. Therefore, Pink Fire is white. Fire element is white. This Pink Fire is rooted, and we do find that the Jia is strong and rooting. So we are dealing with the year pillar that is indirect resource sitting on indirect resource. Hey, Jess, is there indirect resource on the day? Don't have, No, not on the day, Alright, so indirect resource sitting on indirect resource, and of course wood is strong, so we have a very, very strong indirect resource day master. And so if the indirect resource is excessively strong, then indirect resource is unfavorable. So we can say the indirect resource is unfavorable. And indirect resource that is in the stem, in the year, indirect resource that is in the year pillar normally denote childhood. So you can find that the early childhood will not be, will not be slow and conducive. So, and also normally indicate multiple parents. Yeah? So here for this person, Damien, he lived with his mother and father. They divorced when he was 8, and so when he entered his first, when Damien entered his first luck pillar, by the moment he entered his first luck pillar, the parents divorced, and during that year he followed his mother and changed his birth name to take on the new name of his stepfather, Therefore, this would be somewhat a manifestation of a resource, an indirect resource, or at least one can see that indirect resource in the year pillar tends to show this kind of reading, to show that the childhood is troubled. Stepmother, indirect resource manifests in that manner. So therefore that would be just how one can see this chart. And now let's just continue as well. And when he was a teenager, he was arrested, convicted, and implicated for murder. So he was actually convicted for murder, and he was on the death row. He was on the death row. So what happens here is, let's move along. When he was 18 years of age, he was arrested and convicted for the murder of 3 8-year-old children at the age of 18 when he was in 1993. So in 1993 he was 18, and he was entering into a new luck pillar. And so as he entered into the new luck pillar at the age of 18, 19, and that pillar of course is an indirect resource, wood. Has a wood cycle, and wood is already very strong. It was born in winter, so therefore wood is strong. And the day master is fire, white, albeit a bit rooted, so the weak day master facing a favorable, an unfavorable wood in a way, in the form of an indirect resource, may indicate that, because resource is about comfort, and indirect resource would be a kind of discomfort then if it becomes unfavorable. Therefore, he was convicted, and he was on death row when it comes into age of 18. And during while he was in jail, he became very spiritually inclined, and later became very interested in some ceremonial magic, and spent prison studying magic. So if we look into things like that, these are indirect resource phenomena. So if somebody tells me, oh, I'm interested in ceremonial magic, I'm interested in studying magic and learning spiritual, that is all indirect resource. These are all indirect resource. And therefore this would be just to see when you meet, when meeting an indirect resource lapse. So what does indirect resource luck pillar means. So what does indirect resource luck pillar means? An indirect resource luck pillar means that you are drawn to spiritualism, drawn to things of metaphysics in that manner. Or maybe in the ancient past Chinese, these 10 years you dedicate yourself in a monastery to be a monk, to live your life as a monk or monkhood, into that part. Alright, so anyway, let's move along to the part. And subsequently, newer investigations were revealed when DNA testing were getting better, and so his case was reopened, reinvestigated, and to discover that his DNA was not sinned and they had not committed a crime. And therefore, in 2011, he was released from prison. And so in 2011, at the end of this pillar. Okay. And so the entire wood, the entire two wood, which is the tiger and the rabbit, the tiger and the rabbit wood cycle, he spent this period in jail, in prison, and developed spirituality. And so now that he was released at the tail end of it, and he lived his life also very much involved in this, and so he's also a spiritual teacher, and he goes around writing books, podcasts, and also very well known. So in that case now, he's well known for his books, documentaries, podcasts, in terms of spiritual work. And these are all in where his indirect resource is his fasa. So the fasa here, and it's rooted, so it's a rooted fasa. So it's a rooted fasa, meaning that this is how the world would see him, and see him as somebody who is very involved in spiritual work. So he is manifesting or living his into this one part. And this tends to be a common phenomena for fire people. So you see fire-related people, that will be somewhat along the line. You can see pink fire, ting fire. If IR is hidden, tombs in the year stamps. Alright. Now it will be quite the same. So therefore the question is that, once again, if this is earth, and therefore you're referring to indirect resource. Now year is of course upbringing. Year is pure, so therefore this part also represents, especially year. It will be the same thing. People, it will be the same thing. It will be all this also the same thing. Perverted thought. Maybe being a child, perverted thoughts may be more for adults in a pillar, but things like autism and cognitive developmental problems will still manifest itself. Therefore, in a way, this may represent a hidden childhood problem, hidden childhood issues or problem. But the question is, of course, when you say hidden, I would presume that you are referring to no protrusion. There is nothing on the stems, nothing on the stems. So purely hidden. Okay. So if it is purely hidden, therefore it represents, in a way you can say, hidden autism, hidden ADHD, creating some mental issues that can be ostracized, and also perhaps so I'm hearing echo. Can also be, if it is earth with another earth somewhere. If it's earth with earth, it can be punishment. It can be punishment. It can be, because earth, the moment you have earth, there is a tendency for it to have an bullying punishment. There's a bullying punishment. There's a bullying punishment between the ox, the dog, and the goat. Okay, there's a bullying punishment between them. So there's also a punishment between the dragon and the ox into one part. Therefore, that would be somehow these are the manifestation. In a way, then it will be good for a clash. It's good if they meet an earth, earth meeting earth. Therefore, an earth meeting earth will be clash. Hopefully good, but it will be released, and once it is released, then it will be surface. It will be surface, or especially when it comes out. Therefore, it may be known. So wouldn't know whether it will be true or whether it will be favorable or not when there is a clash and when the thing is being protruded or to be seen into the part. Alright, so therefore that would be just also looking into what happens if it is hidden. If it is in death and emptiness, therefore let's death and emptiness would of course means everything is on 50% discount. It means that there are certain blockages. Let me just move it. So I think we have covered all this. So all these are the materials that it comes along. It's quite a lot of materials if you can read. Okay. Therefore, if we find indirect resource in emptiness, so indirect resource in emptiness, long story short, wrong reading, wrong intuition, wrong reading, wrong focus. So if there is death and emptiness, indirect resource subsists in an emptiness, then it normally means that the day master cannot trust, cannot rely on sixth sense, cannot rely on the deductive thinking. And if the person happens to be in our industry, feng shui, I Ching consultants, then it's not a good thing. Sorry. So it's a bit of a disappointment, or it's a bit of a letdown if somebody desires to be a consultant or to be a practitioner and to find that the indirect resource is now that I wouldn't say that that's an immediate deal breaker. It's just that do not dabble in indirect resource, because feng shui metaphysics can also be handled, can also be treated in a direct resource approach. That means it basically means use a direct resource approach. Or maybe to be more precise, it's not necessarily direct resource, use an alternative approach. So there are many ways for us to do many things, and so if we do have the interest and the keenness in this, there is always an alternate approach to be used. It's just that do not activate so much on intuition, on feelings, but to be more technical into the approach. Things like this can be done. And then we can also find that what happens when we find indirect resource in emptiness. If there is, then don't rely on intuition. Now, in a way, I do not just mean exactly this. All this also includes intuition in anything, especially trading as well. Especially trading, especially investments. That means one should not rely on gut feel. And the alternative to the solution is that when you do not rely on gut feel, then you would have to leverage on another person. That means for investment purposes, for trading purposes, then you need to be aware that you cannot rely on your own intuition. It tends to lead you wrong, especially when you have your two fires. Two fires in a stem. So if there are two ting fires in the stems, if there are two ping fire in the stems, then out. Do not, the intuition is not going to be very correct. Not going to be correct. So one should not rely on that. Alright, so this is how we can see how indirect resource can be read, how one can manifest in the luck pillar and the stems, on the branches, hidden and emptiness. And that will be how we can read and we can appraise the strength of the indirect resource. Alright, so that really wraps up on our today. So you have your materials here, and so next week when we complete and finish off, we'll then see how the interaction, how indirect resource interacts with all the other gods in terms of the natal chart as well as also in the luck pillar. So till then, next week then, I'll see you then. Okay, good night and thank you everyone.